Well, everybody, officially good afternoon and welcome to Food Focus online webinar. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we're looking forward to sharing the next 45 minutes to an hour with you, chatting to you about non-food chemicals and the requirements for registration to ensure that your chemicals are safe in your food processing environment. I'm joined today by Stephanie Ludwig, and she's from NSF. Stephanie's joining us from the US. So thank you so much for getting out of bed so early this morning, Stephanie. We really do appreciate the fact that you're giving us your valuable time. Before I officially introduce Stephanie and hand over to her, I just want to make sure that everybody understands the housekeeping rules if it's the first time you're joining us for a webinar. You are obviously should be able to hear us and you're coming through your computer speakers. So please make sure that if you are having a sound problem, you check your sound settings. Telephone communication or connection won't be available for this particular webinar. If everything looks a little squashed, then on the right-hand side, you can actually see a maximize button, like we would normally see it on our menus. So then you'll be able to see the screen full size, and you can click on restore at any time to take it back to its normal size. Everyone is on mute setting, so we can't hear any of you, unfortunately, but what we can do is we can hear you on our question bar, so please feel free during the course of the presentation to write down comments as well as any questions that you may have using the question option during the course of the webinar. Thanks, Stephanie. If you can move it on for me. In terms of, as far as the time is concerned, if we have an opportunity for Q&As after the presentation, that will be great, but otherwise, as I said, our normal procedure is to put everything into an article, and that will be shared with you via the link that you registered for the webinar. There will be a short survey at the end of the webinar, and we'd like to ask you to please complete that. It just gives us good feedback to know whether this was a useful exercise, and also, if you have any particular comments with regards to the content. We are recording the webinar, and we will send you the link once the edited version is up on our YouTube channel, and so we will share that with you, and we look forward to your feedback and you sharing that with colleagues that you may have who may also be able to benefit from this information. I think that's all the housekeeping that's out the way. So now the next thing to do is to introduce you to our special guest today, and that is Stephanie Ludwig. Stephanie is the group leader for NSF's International's non-food compound registration program. And NSF International, the Public Health and Safety Company, is a not-for-profit, non-government organization, and this is a world leader in standards development, product certification, education, and risk management. For over 70 years, NSF is to public health, safety, and protection of the environment. Herself manages many aspects of the NSF Food Safety Product Certification Program. She does this by contributing to the development of offerings, improving existing, enhancing customer service, and representing NSF at events, conferences, and so we're very, very fortunate to have her with us today. She works closely with the NSF certified companies. We have Louis in the audience from CRC and industry stakeholders, and by doing this, she assures that the programs continue to utilize the most up-to-date regulatory requirements. Her expertise in the NSF certification and regulatory compliance process continues NSF's mission to protect and improve public health and safety. She has a Bachelor of Science degree from Michigan State University, and she's currently sitting in a chilly Michigan. Welcome, Stephanie. Thank you so much for being with us.
Linda, thank you very much for that nice warm introduction. I'm very excited to be here to talk about the non-food compounds registration program and what we can do for the industry in supporting their chemicals that are used in food processing facilities. So today I would like to first of all give an overview of what we do at NSF International. I'm then going to talk a little bit about chemicals in food production. I'd like to tell you about our non-food compounds registration program, the requirements, and how that works within our program, and then discuss a little bit about the category codes that we see that we know are the category codes we see most often that are used in food processing facilities, and talk a little bit about those requirements. And then if we have time, we can answer any questions. A lot of times I find that questions are related to a specific company, and I would be more than happy to answer anything offline or have private conversations after the presentation with anybody that is interested in more information or has specific questions. But as Linda said, we are a global independent public health and safety organization, and our mission and focus has always been on protecting and improving public health. We are independent, we are not for profit, and we are not part of any government entity, which means that we are completely able to work with our stakeholders across many facets of the industry to meet their needs. I like to tell the story about how we came into this industry, why we got involved with food safety. And it started with our founders back in the 1930s and 40s, where in the US, people were starting to go out to dinner a lot, and the local regulators, the local inspectors were going into these restaurants, and they were looking at, as they were doing their inspections, the inspections were not consistent. So what they were looking in one area might not be consistent what they were looking in, say, New York City or in Florida. And our founders thought, wait a minute, we need to have some consistency with what the inspectors are looking for. So they began writing the first standard on food equipment sanitation. And they published that back in the 40s, and we became NSF International, or we became NSF, which was the National Sanitation Foundation. And we were founded in part of the University of Michigan School of Public Health. From there, we have written over 70 standards. We continue to write standards on food safety, as well as a variety of other areas in the industry. So we do a lot of things at NSF across our global laboratories. We are classified as a testing, inspection, and certification organization and do quite a bit in the industry. Most of what we can do can be easily explained in this graphic. We have a standards development division. Back when we started in 1940 was our first standard, but now we have a huge division whose purpose is to help groups or industries or businesses come together to assist in developing standards on public health. At any given time, we have standard experts working on numerous standards that are under development in many areas, such as sustainability, water treatment, water safety, and dietary supplements, amongst some of the other areas. They also maintain all of our current ANSI standards, as we at NSF are an accredited ANSI standards secretariat. In addition to this, we have a lot of testing capabilities. We have a network of global labs that is increasingly expanding and adding on technical and niche capabilities to our portfolio of testing. We also do product certification and registration, as well as system certification and registration, and have a global auditing force. Our auditors and inspectors are out in the world today conducting inspections on food safety audits, working with our product certifiers. They are in farms, processing centers, distribution centers, retail environments, working throughout the entire supply chain to assess and ensure compliance with various standards and audit schemes. We also have a world-class training and education center that is based in Guelph, Canada, that offers a variety of on-site training, classroom training, e-learning, accredited training across all aspects of food safety. So we do a lot at NSF International. As you can see, this graphic shows where we are across the world. So originally we started as NSF, the National Sanitation Foundation, but as we expanded across the globe, we changed our name to NSF International. The NSF does not stand for anything anymore, but that's where it came from for anybody that was interested. But you can see all of these dots on here are our office and laboratories. We have services in 168 countries with 51 office and laboratory locations. So we really are an international company. We are recognized internationally and accepted all across the globe as a leader in food safety. This next slide just shows a sampling of many of the clients we work with through all of our programs. So just an idea of some of the clients that we work very, very closely with. So now that you know a little bit about who we are, I would like to talk a little bit about chemicals in food production. The first thing I want to talk about is GFSI, the Global Safety Food Initiative. So the food manufacturing supply chain is a complex one in today's manufacturing world. Supplies are coming in from thousands of companies all over the world, which results in redundant audits, confusion as to responsibilities, inefficiency of getting those products to market, which cause higher costs on the final product, and determining what needs to be verified, what needs to be validated, depending on what company is selling a specific product into the shared supplier base. Each of these different companies has different requirements for what they want to have audited and assessed, which causes that result of that redundancy in audits. That creates increased costs for the supplier base because they have to be audited by multiple facilities, and there's not a lot of consistency, and there's redundancy in that. So the Global Food Safety Initiative came together in order to eliminate some of this, to make alignment with what these auditors, what the food processing suppliers need. They brought together government, scheme owners, retailers, academia, the service providers, the certification bodies. And what they did was they decided to have their goal was to have a collaborative approach from all of these stakeholders to ensure consistency in understanding and ensuring the reliability of the results. The goal of this was to decrease those costs so that we don't have to have all of these multiple audits from multiple entities in order to meet that final goal of food safety. So this started around 2015, and by 2013, they had convened many technical working groups. They were defining key elements to cover the entire food chain. So they wanted to have this from a farm to table to cover all aspects of that entire supply chain from when the food starts until it gets onto the table. And it's an ongoing effort until everything is fully implemented. One of the key elements that they focused on is the use of chemicals in the supply chain. They identify chemical use throughout the supply chain and have begun to implement measures to reduce the risks associated with the use of these chemicals. One of the results of this is, or an example of one of these implications of GFSI on product use in the supply chain for food production that is really not food itself, but is the chemicals that are used, is the requirement that you confirm lubricants, lubricating oils are food grade and of a known allergen status. So as they go through these chemicals, they want to make sure they're safe. And the reason they want to make sure that they are safe is because there have been consequences of chemicals that were not safe, that were used in food processing, that caused serious issues to the end user. So these are some of those costly consequences. Turkey was recalled, ham was recalled, toxic substances were found in some of the end product, which caused consumers to be sick. In addition to that, we know in South Africa, there are stories of the Listeria contamination, which brings us to the general importance of cleaning in a food facility. And it's important to ensure that the chemicals you use are safe to be used for their intended use in the food processing, and they're not going to cause any further harm to our food supply chain. So GFSI is working to ensure that all the products we use are safe from farm to table. So that brings us to our non-food compounds registration program. So what are we? So we are a registration body that verifies the safety of chemical products that are used in food facilities. By verifying the safety of these products, we are able to help the end users effectively manage any risks that are posed by their chemicals and their processing aids to ensure that they are safe to be used in that food processing facility. So where did we start? So initially there was a non-food compounds registration program that was done through the USDA, which is the United States Department of Agriculture, and they would evaluate formulations that were used in food processing facilities. They came up with over 90 different category codes that were grouped based by product type. So these types might be cleaners or lubricants, water treatment chemicals, hand washes. So they have all these different category codes that were then broken down by their end use and evaluated based on specific criteria. So the USDA did this for many years, and then due to funding and a variety of reasons, in about 1998, they decided that they were going to end this program, which created a concern for the industry in that how are we going to verify that these products that are used in our food processing are going to be safe. So one option was we could do a third-party evaluation. There could be independent bodies that will go through and verify this information, or we could do self-certification. The concern with self-certification is that there's always the chance that these products aren't what they say they are. So at that time, NSF, with our history in food safety and our mission to protect public health, we approached the USDA and said we would like to take over this program. So we worked with the USDA in order to move all of their information to NSF to create our own independent registration. We coordinated, we moved all of the information from their white book. The white book was an online listing that listed the company name. It also listed the products and what category code they were registered to. And we moved that over to the NSF white book. So in 2001, we published our first white book. And by 2002, any of the products that were listed in the USDA white book were removed. And the NSF white book was the only white book for these particular categories. Today, we have over 20,000 registered products in 70 category codes, and it is just growing. There's many compounds. We continue to grow in all the different markets. So how do we do registration? So the general registration process is as in any program, we would start with an application. So the application is essentially getting your company registered within our NSF system. There's no fee for the actual application process. We work with the client to find out what it is they're interested in, what type of products they have, what category code would make the most sense for their product as they are having their review to the registration program. From there, we request very specific data for our review program. We look at the formulation and we evaluate through the CAS number, the trade names, the chemical names, who the supplier is, the percent composition of each of the ingredients within the formulation, and the regulatory reference. We assess those, we send that to our toxicology team, which then assesses that formulation to ensure that there is nothing in that formulation that would pose a public health risk for that end use of that product. We also review the label. It would include all of the information that will be on the final label, making sure that the trade name is consistent. That's what will go in our listing, so your end users are able to go to our white book and find your product and see what that product is registered to and what any limitations that might be on that. And that's linked to your company name. Once we complete our review of the formulation and the label, we determine if your product is acceptable for that end use, and if so, a letter is issued and it is listed in our public listing. If we find that there's something in that formulation or in that label that needs to be addressed, we would issue what's called a feedback letter, and that identifies what would need to be addressed in order for that product to be acceptable for that category code. Once your product is deemed acceptable, you are authorized to use the NSF mark. So what we do is we verify the acceptability of all those ingredients. We look at proprietary mixtures and supplier formulations. We verify the product trade name, that the labeling components are present, that there's any ingredient statements that are on the label are acceptable for whatever that end use is. We also require that if you are selling to a foreign market and your label is in a foreign language, that we are provided with a translation so that we make sure that it is consistent with our requirements, and that there's not any end use instructions that contradict the category code use. For example, if the category code requires a rinse and the label says no rinse, that would be a contradiction. So this is an example of our NSF White Book listing. This is the source for food processors, so that they can go in and they can verify that your product is safe for the end use. So when you go to our public listing page, it would identify your company name, any products that you have listed, and the category code that it's listed to. In addition, when you click on that product, the letter that is issued to the client would come up, and it identifies all of the information related to that product registration and what category code it is registered to. So that's our general process of our requirement on how we do lubricants, or how we do our registration process. One question that I frequently get asked is on the cost of this. How much does it cost to go through this type of registration? So the cost varies on the number of ingredients that are in the formulation. So when we do our reviews, depending on the number of ingredients, each product registration varies between about $565 to $1,100. In addition, there is an annual listing fee for the products to be maintained in our white book and the letter to be maintained. So that averages about $575 for the corporate number. This is in US dollars, and then there is an additional $45 per product registration fee. So for the nominal amount that we do charge, it does give you it gives you that ability to say that your product has been registered, it has been reviewed, it has been deemed acceptable for that end use. You can use that for for your safety audits in order to let the inspectors know that these products are acceptable to be used for those specific category codes in that food processing environment. So if we talk about our different types of category codes, we have lubricants are one of our main products that get registered. So lubricant classifications, we have two primary classifications. The first one is an H1 lubricant. Those are lubricants where there is a possibility of food contact. So these are not intended for the inclusion in the edible product, but they may come in contact with food under normal use in the food processing facility. So by the USDA, these were classified as H1 lubricants. It's well known through the industry that H1 is incidental food contact. The application for this would be for lubricating machine parts, reducing wear and friction, dissipating heat, but again, it is not intended to be directly added to food. H2 are lubricants where there is no possibility of food contact. They cannot be used food grade to describe this type of product. The applications for this would be hydraulic oils, gear, cutting oils. By design, the product would not come into contact with edible products. Usually they're enclosed, for example, in a gearbox. So it's very important to understand the distinction that H1 products is where there is a possibility of food contact, but not directly added to food, whereas H2 is where there is no possibility of food contact and cannot use food grade to describe. So in addition to the H1 or H2, our non-food compounds registration, we also offer ISO 21469 certification. This is the safety of machinery lubricants with incidental products for contact hygiene requirements. ISO 21469 is strictly for H1 lubricants and would be used in food and beverage. It can be used in cosmetics, pharmaceutical, and animal feed. This uses the foundation of our registration program, but then includes more stringent guidelines to obtain the certification. It is a voluntary international standard, and the reason this came about was back in 1998 when we began taking over the non-food compounds program and discussing alternate approaches for approval, and our registration program was forming. Two big industries, the national lubrication and grease industry, as well as the European lubrication and grease industry, considered developing their own programs. So they started looking at different standards, and drafts were developed. They looked at standards through the German, through the DIN standard, through NSF ANSI standard, and we looked at different options for this, but nothing was really completed. But then, through ISO, a working group was formed to develop a global standard for lubricants that were used in food processing and other specialty industries. So we worked as part of this working group, and in parallel to our registration program, we launched the ISO 21469 program was launched. So in 2005, this final standard was published. And for a time, there was really little interest in this new standard, in part because the registration program was working well in the US and EU markets, but there was a call and a desire to have a more international standard. So in 2006, we actually began developing our own ISO 21469 certification program, which is based on the requirements of the international ISO standard. So if someone is looking to have the NSF ISO 21469 certification, we have the following key requirements. So the first requirement is that your company, your facility needs to have ISO 9001 registration. In addition to that, our requirements are grouped into these 5 steps. We have the labeling component. The labeling is consistent with the ISO standard, where we are going to look at all of the information that's provided on that label. We are going to make sure that your product is traceable. The label needs to include the certified facility, and that facility is also listed in our listing. These labels also need to include shelf life and expiration date. They need to include suitable storage conditions, and any product limitations and restrictions. So the label review has more requirements than just a general label, and this is all set out with the ISO 21469 requirements. The formulation review is essentially the same as the non-food compound registration review, in which we're going to look at the ingredient suppliers, the chemical names and CAS numbers, the percentage of the composition, and any regulatory reference that would be appropriate to deem it acceptable as an H1 lubricant. In addition to those basic requirements, which are similar to non-food compounds registration, we have 3 additional requirements. One is the risk assessment. Prior to certification, a company shall complete a risk assessment for the life of the product. The risk assessment addresses the measures and controls for preventing any lubricant contamination, the service age and changes that the product may undergo in use, any foreseeable misuse of the product, really looking from the product's lifespan from start to finish to make sure that there are no points of contamination, assessing the risk for that, and making sure that there are control points in place to address any issues that may come up. Another key component of the certification is testing. So samples will undergo an FTIR test that verify the identification of a master spectrum against a sample spectrum. Finally, there is an on-site audit. for ISO 21469 certification. And those audits would include a walkthrough of the production area, verifying that procedures for minimizing any contamination are verified, good manufacturing practices are followed, that the cleaning and maintenance and calibration records are valid. They will also verify the qualification records of those ingredients and raw materials that have been submitted on that formulation are what you're using in your process. They will verify that there are any records of any product testing, that your quality control is in place, and that risk assessment is available and up to date. At that point, they also verify that ISO 9000 registration is being maintained at the facility. So many of our clients feel that the facility audit is a scary event. We at NSF do not think so. We like to think that especially that initial audit is a opportunity for our auditors to meet with the team to help address any gaps and work with the facility to make sure that everything that they are doing is in compliant and reinforcing food safety. So once a company achieves their certification, they have a separate listing. So we have our NSF White Book for our non-food compounds registration, but on our public listing page, we also have an NSF ISO 21469 product listing. This would include the company name as well as the facility and the product names. This is a great source for those food processors to, and also for your inspectors to verify that you are doing everything possible to ensure the food safety of the chemicals you're using in the processing. So some key differences between the H1 registration and ISO 21469 is that for ISO, there is production facility traceability, so the facility is required to be on the label. Testing is not required for just an H1 registration, but is required for ISO 21469. There is the annual surveillance of audits and testing, and there are two separate marks. So while all of our marks can have our blue circle with our NSF acronym in there, the text box beneath would be different that you would see on those labels depending on what they are registered for. So moving on from lubricants, cleaners and water treatment products are the other categories that we register the most products for at SF International. So we have, as I was talking before in the USDA and how products are categorized, we have a category such as cleaning products. They are assigned a category code, and those category codes are based on that intended end use. So in the cleaning products, you can see that we have 8 different intended end uses for just general cleaning products, such as general cleaners, floor cleaners, wall cleaners, degreasers. And then we also have within all of our category codes an X code. So that bottom code where it says AX, we also register ingredients that might be used in cleaning products. So we have a whole list of products that would be used within formulations that would compose many of these different end use for the category codes. We also, so as you can see, they're grouped together by the category codes, and each category code has a specific requirement, but most products must comply with the following. So all food products and packaging materials shall be removed or carefully protected prior to usage. So when you're using cleaning products, it's important to understand that we don't want these products to come in contact with the food products. So we have specific requirements in the non-food compound registration guidelines that identify what those requirements are. Many of these require a potable water rinse after its use. Another key component is that when they're used according to manufacturer's instructions, cleaners shall not exhibit a noticeable odor or leave a visible residue. It is our opinion that if there is a fragrance in a cleaning product and it leaves an odor, that can mask unsanitary conditions. So it's really important that if there are any fragrances, that those dissipate so that those are not left, that a person could smell and not notice that there's any unsanitary condition. We also have antimicrobial products. These are products that that could be used requiring a rinse or not requiring a rinse, and we also have ingredients. So products that are containing bacterial or enzyme control cultures shall undergo a salmonella analysis, which I'll talk about in a few minutes. These products that are sold within the USA must also be registered with the EPA, but if they're not sold in the USA, we can put a caveat on the label that just says that they're not registered for use in the United States. And for the D2 categories, these product labels must also specify the amount of time allowed to be air dried for them to be effective. We also have some additional cleaner registration categories, such as solvent cleaners and sewer drain cleaners. So the K categories, which are our solvent cleaners, these products typically consist of hydrocarbon, chlorinated hydrocarbon, or other water immiscible solvents for the end use as outlined above. So there may be non-processing area products or electric instrument cleaners. We also have adhesive and glue removers. And then we also have sewer and drain cleaners, which are our L category. There's just general cleaners, enzymatic cleaners, and then also ingredients used for sewer and drain cleaners. So we have quite a big spectrum of cleaner registration categories. So we can look for each ingredient or each product based on what that end use is and really review it to those specific requirements that are outlined in our guidelines. In addition to cleaners, water treatment chemicals are another area that we see many products. So water treatment products would include phosphate products, silicates, chlorine products, cooling and retort water products, as well as boiler treatment products. The majority of water treatment products must be grass. They are used in the water treatment and frequently come in contact with food. So depending on what that category code is what those requirements would be. So as I mentioned before, we do require testing for some of our category codes. We offer salmonella testing, which is required when a product contains bacteria cultures, which is very common in our L2 category code, which is the sewer and drain cleaners. We also require odor testing, very common in our A categories, which are our general cleaning categories. As I said, if fragrance is present, that product may have to undergo odor testing to ensure that it's not masking any unsanitary conditions. So what we do at NSF is our registration really verifies that all of those ingredients are safe to be used in the food processing facility. Our non-food compounds guideline outlined the requirements for each of these category codes. I just gave you a sampling of our most common category codes, but as I said, we have over 90 category codes for every area of food processing, of those chemicals that are used within the food processing facility. We really look at all of those ingredients to ensure that they are safe. We verify the supplier information and the ingredients from those suppliers. We have a huge database that we can verify those ingredients used within your ingredient product formulation. We look at the labeling components and verify that those products are safe. So what is the value of our program? Our value is a reassurance that those product meets those strict standards of safety and quality for those intended end uses. The potential risk for reduction for hazardous incidental chemical contact with food is reduced by registering these products, because you have that documentation in order to provide for your auditors that says that this product is safe for that use. It really is a reliable prerequisite approach to complement any HACCP plan and provide a path towards compliance with that Global Food Safety Initiative and their benchmark standards. So in addition to what I talked about before, I gave you a sampling of our general non-food or general NSF companies. We also have a list here of just our registered products and many of our companies that work with us on our registration. So we can see we have a lot of clients here, and some of which are utilizing those programs in South Africa, and we're hoping to grow this program more, as we think that the benefit of registering our products and providing food safety is really important in this market. So in conclusion, we want to start with hygienic equipment, but we don't want to end there. A certification, a registration, or a verification ensures that your products are safe for their intended use. So verification that your equipment is capable of being cleaned, but if it's not installed and operated properly, a risk remains. Having equipment that is hygienic is one piece of a great food safety picture, but it's not the magic bullet that cures all. Used in a system, it helps maximize food safety plans. So when you use a non-food compound registration program, along with a facility that has a great HACCP plan and general good processing facility information along with their food safety, you know that you have a safe and reliable system that works together. So I thank you for your time, and I think we probably have some time for some questions. Linda, has anybody put anything, asked some questions?
Hi, Stephanie. Thank you. That was really very comprehensive. I do have a few questions, if you can. You mentioned the term GRAS, G-R-A-S. Won't you just define that for us? Because it's not a term that's commonly used in South African legislation.
Okay, so GRAS means generally recognized as safe.
Okay, all right. So in the context of what you were referring to is all the components, you want to make sure that the chemicals that are in the particular formulation fall within that definition.
Exactly.
Okay. Perfect. That was just one thing that I wasn't sure everybody would understand. Yes. Now, if we take this to the South African market, one of the things that I just wanted to make sure we understood was you have the two options for certification: the H1 or the registration of lubricants under the H1, H2 categories of the NSF White Book, and then we have the ISO 21469 certification program. Am I correct in saying that if an H1 is certified under ISO 21469, would that automatically mean it would be covered by the NSF White Book listing as well? Would it have both logos on it? Sorry if I'm not making myself clear.
No, you are clear. So they are two programs that are independent of each other. So if a client would like to have the H1 registration, they would use both of their marks on their label. So for ISO 21469, it has the requirements for the H1. It's reviewed to the same requirements of the H1 registration. You are not required, if you have ISO 21469, to also have the H1 registration. What we have found, many clients start with the registration program, which then they know that their product is going to be acceptable as an H1, and then when they're ready, then they make that leap to the ISO 21469, since it is it is a much more intensive process with the risk assessment and the on-site audits. So they would be able to use both of the marks on their label if they have both registration and certification.
Super. Thank you. Yeah, no, that's perfect. That clarifies that clearly for me. If we had to, I think a lot of people in our audience are food manufacturers who are using lubricants, water treatment chemicals, but they're not necessarily manufacturers of these chemicals. Okay. And during their food safety audits, like you said, you have to be able to demonstrate to the inspector that your chemicals are safe for the application in your food facility. How is this the same approach that you experience in the US and in Europe? What would the audit criteria be? What is expected to be in place in order to meet this kind of criteria, on your side of the world?
So yes. So as the inspectors are going into these facilities, they want to know that the everything that they're using in that processing is safe for whatever the application might be. So what the non-food compounds registration does is it gives the proof that the ingredients within those chemicals that they are using has been evaluated, and that those chemicals are safe to be used for whatever that intended end use is, as long as they are being used as is appropriate. So the auditors are looking for verification of that, and we're finding that they're going in and they're looking at the process, they're looking at all of the different components. And I think from my understanding and in talking to our auditors, it's the same across the world. Globally, they're looking for that same information, the same process, the same control points in place, and the same documentation to verify that everything in those processing plants, in those facilities that they're using, is acceptable and not going to cause any public health risks.
Now, if you had to, say to a company a food processing company, practically speaking, how should they go about assessing their hazards in relation to lubricants, cleaning chemicals, water treatment companies? I'm always concerned that a company is quite happy to get a piece of paper, and so long as there's a piece of paper in the file, everything's okay. But I don't think that's the point. I think the point is having an understanding of what the hazards are. So how would you, sort of advise food companies in that regard?
So I feel that if a company goes through, I'm not completely understanding your question. If a company has the documentation, if they've done their due diligence to verify that their products are acceptable for what that end use is, that would be sufficient in my mind as the proof of what their products, how their products is acceptable. And
I think what you're saying in terms of the NSF process is the due diligence aspect. You've kind of opened that up in the sense that I can receive a certificate from my supplier, but I can actually verify this information myself on your website.
Absolutely, yes. So so you're not just taking your supplier's word for it. You would want to go to the NSF White Book in order to say, or the certification if it's an ISO 21469, to verify that that product is actually listed there. Many suppliers may say, oh, well, my product meets this requirement. Yep, I'm compliant with that. But they haven't done the actual process to prove that. So, that kind of comes back to the beginning where we were talking about, okay, do we want to have somebody self-certified? Well, there's no checks and balances with that. If somebody just says, yes, it's going to work for that, what's the proof? What is it that's saying that, yep, it really is? Has there been a independent third-party laboratory or certification body that has actually looked at these ingredients to verify and say, yep, we give our stamp of approval that these products are safe? It's having that verification that will assist in increasing the confidence that products are safe. And then also, it's a checks and balance that should something happen, should there be some sort of contamination, should there be an issue, and you also have that in your back pocket to say, wait a minute, I did do my due diligence, I saw that this product was safe, what happened? And so then you have that as a tool in order to use to, in those processes to address any situations to prove that you have done your due diligence.
Absolutely. So, Stephanie, I think, from the South African perspective, the main I think interest in terms of the discussion is the fact that many of our food safety audit criteria ask for a proof of registered chemicals that are, or proof of registration that chemicals, non-food chemicals, are safe to be used in a food facility. It was interesting listening that you are involved with companies in the US, but was I right in understanding that you also deal with European companies using this process? I'm talking now manufacturers of non-food compounds.
So yes, actually, in our program, 49% of our program is US and 51% of our program is international. So more of our program is throughout the international market, where the clients are bringing their products to us to register and verify those formulations for whatever that category code for their intended end use are. So we are more of an, it's 50-50, it's almost 50-50, but technically we are more international than a US-based company for this program.
Okay, and then the last question is, if I'm a South African company manufacturing non-food chemicals, I can access this scheme? This is an option for South African manufacturers, both the White Book listing as well as the ISO 21469. Will you be able to offer those services to South African companies?
Absolutely, absolutely. If anybody is interested in more information, we can definitely discuss offline and discuss what the options are. But yes, we are active in South Africa. We have several, actually many companies that are already registered. You can go into our NSF White Book to see what those companies are. We're already active in South Africa.
Super. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you so much for your input. We really do appreciate the presentation. I think you've given us sort of a rigorous understanding of exactly how the process works, clarified all the steps that are necessary for both White Book listing as well as the ISO 21469. So thank you so much for your time and for sharing this information with us. Everybody, thank you for being with us. We would appreciate any other questions. I know that Stephanie's time is a little limited, but we are happy to pass those questions on to her, and we will make sure that we give, send you all an article that covers all the requirements, or rather all the questions that might come from the presentation. So please don't feel that you can't still send through a question. Please, as we leave the webinar, don't forget to do the quick survey so that we can get some feedback from you in that respect, so we can make sure that we continue to assist you in your food safety journey. Stephanie, thank you so much, and we look forward to chatting to you again in the future.
Thanks, Linda. Thank you, everybody. Have a great day.
You too. Have a great day, Stephanie. Bye. Hi everybody, I see the question from Patricia. Thanks Patricia, we will definitely make sure that that one goes through to them to get an answer from you with regards to allergens. There was a question from Rajan. Yes, that is the understanding of the program in terms of being able to offer the same outcome as far as registration of the products are concerned, as an alternative to look at, or to, that your suppliers of non-food chemicals can look at as far as making sure that you can have the assurance that they're safe to use in your plant. Based on what Stephanie said, I think ISO 21469 is the closest fit to the South African standards. The reason why I say that is because the audit of the facility, the production facility, is included in ISO 21469, and that is not part of the White Book listing. The White Book listing is purely a laboratory analysis, a laboratory viewpoint. So I think that would be the closest requirements. Perhaps we can discuss the other alternatives that you've mentioned with regards to other certification bodies offline. Right, any last questions from anyone? Please make sure you send them through. Thank you so much for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your Thursday afternoon, and so great having you as part of Food Focus webinar. Keep well. Bye then.